I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So, welcome. I think we may be live already. So, welcome. I this is a
Thank
new.
you.
We're trying a new technology here. So we'll
I'm
see how it
noticing a
works.
slight delay on my end.
Hmm. Well, let's see here. Let's see if it's even coming up on if it's going through restream. Oh, you know what? We may. Let me see what's going on with restream. Yeah, it seems to be going, but it's the wrong title. All right. Let's change this. All right, and we're gonna grab this. All right. Well, we don't know if anyone's on right now. Oh, we got some viewers. All right, so welcome, David. Can you handle? Is the delay too weird for you, or can we muster through?
No, I think we can give it a shot.
All right.
You'll
So
notice my words
welcome.
trail my mouth.
All good. Well, this is also about getting past here. I can see you both. Oh, great. Thank you, Leonard. So Leonard is watching here. So welcome, David. If you wouldn't mind, shift to your right just a little bit. No, the other way. Your other right. There you
The
go.
other right.
Perfect.
There we
There
are.
you go. All right. So welcome. We're going to dive right in, and I'd like to give you the intro you deserve. So are you ready?
Sure, go for
All
it.
right. So, welcome to The Real Deal On. And today we're going to discuss leadership and transformation with David Tennant. David has over 30 years of experience. 30 years of experience in the energy manufacturing and service industries. This includes consulting, engineering, marketing, operations, and senior management. He's directed over 3.5 billion, that's a billion with a B, in programs and resources with P&L accountability. He lived for 2 years in the Caribbean, directing the successful turnaround of a major utility, saving over 140 million in yearly operating costs. He helped a French chemical company implement Sarbanes-Oxley financial reporting requirements and developed a 90 million German manufacturing facility in southeastern US. He's led engagements in Canada, New Zealand, the United Arab Emirates, Germany, the Caribbean, and the Czech Republic. He holds degrees in engineering and businesses and currently serves as the chairman of the board of an electric distribution company. He has authored over 20 papers on technical and managerial topics and 2 books. He lives in Kennesaw, Georgia with his wife, Jan, and has 2 adult children. Welcome, David, to our conversation. Very nice, very nice. So thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you first of all of sharing your most valuable asset, and that is your time, your resources, your wisdom. And the purpose of this conversation is really to uncover some success formulas, some strategies. What has, with all your experience, I'm sure you've seen some craziness, and you you know that, well, this isn't going to be forever. So I'll take my glasses off so you don't have the reflection. That things are not permanent necessarily, and perhaps since you've seen some of these craziness experiences before, perhaps you could shed some light on how we can all gracefully and elegantly make our way through this weird time. And also just a little bit of your background and what makes you so apt to handle these challenges.
Well, it's interesting. I got into the consulting world quite by accident. I was just asked by a company to come and help them, and from there it just took off. But it's interesting. I've consulted in a lot of industries and with a lot of business leaders, and I tend to run across the same problems. And this probably isn't going to surprise some of your listeners. It's poor planning, poor communications, poor execution, the wrong people in charge, and on and on. And so a lot of times when I'm listening to a client for the first time, I can almost tell you what their problems are going to be. And I consider myself very fortunate because I've had engagements all over the world, and it's given me a wealth of insight into different cultural aspects of how different people work. I'm not saying it's wrong or it's right, it's just different, and you just have to adapt to that. But maybe for starters, I've got a list here of where leaders go wrong. Shall we continue with that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, with your
Cool.
experience, you kind of are what you just shared, like kind of seeing, this is going to be a problem. That's that's leadership 101 is anticipation, right? So if there's something that you could glean into, what are some tales or key points to observe, and it's obviously super helpful.
Well, I've seen this in heads of corporations, but this can also trickle down to people in middle management or project management roles, and that is a dictatorship in decision making, and I'm sure we know what that means, poor interpersonal skills, an egocentric and dictatorial manner, abusive and arrogant, poor communicator, and this one's important, oblivious to the corporate culture, and a poor listener. And a lot of times I find several of those, if you want to call them flaws, in individuals. And so you find when you're working for a person with those characteristics, people aren't going to stick around for very long. They're not going to follow you. And I think there's a lot of things we can do. Not everyone is cut out for leadership. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Some people really don't want to be in a leadership role. They don't want to deal with people problems. And that comes with the territory. They don't want to deal with having to strategize and think through steps into the future. So, having the right person in charge of a business initiative or a company is a really big deal. And I think companies are becoming more adept at trying to uncover some of those personal flaws that I just mentioned. There's a company I'm aware of where they had a very brilliant senior executive, smart guy, did a lot of things for the company, but um, per that list I just rattled off, he had three or four of those serious flaws, and he was eventually asked to leave. It's really sad because the guy was very accomplished, very smart, went to a top tier school, but was abusive to his subordinates, somewhat arrogant, and it didn't fit the culture of the company. So you can't ignore a company's culture. And these days, I think companies are trying to be more flexible with their work roles. Some people like to work from home. Um, they want and especially a lot of the younger people coming into the workforce today, they want a better work-life balance. And so I think a lot of the old rules and policies that companies had over the last 40 years are really having a total redo. And
For
that's not
sure.
necessarily a bad thing.
Well, no, not of course not. So, what has been your experience with that dynamic of the working from home? Because there is a certain cultural benefit, right? There's pros and cons for everything. So
Sure.
when we're in the office together, if there's an opportunity for face-to-face interactions, for really getting to know each other on a more personal level, and when that happens, oftentimes there are pros and cons to that, obviously, right? Sometimes the comfort level is too much and people get a little too casual or complacent on some levels. Yet on the other side of that, if there's that disconnect, the culture then becomes, well, I am just a number, right? Because they don't care, they don't see me. I just, I'm literally part of the matrix. I plug into this technology that we're doing right now, and that can create a disconnect. So, how have you found ways to balance that, right? So, you have your work life balance, but you also have your interpersonal connection balance when you don't have the opportunity to spend that time in person?
That's a really good point. And with well, first of all, a lot of global companies were already having meetings and things by Zoom or Teams anyway. So that wasn't anything new to the global companies, especially if you're say in Los Angeles and you've got manufacturing plants around the world
Of
or in
course.
Asia. So that was pretty common. But when the pandemic hit, in 2019, 2020, then pretty much everybody had to work from home, and it was very easy to get Zoom or Teams burnout. And I'm aware of some companies, they'd hire new people and they'd be working from home. They haven't even met people on their team in person. It's like 3 to 6 months before they even get to go to the office and meet people. So it's a bit of a challenge. So here's some of the pros of working from home. I think especially people that have children, it gives them some flexibility. They can schedule school appointments or doctor's appointments for their children around their schedule. So they may take the morning off, but then work from noon until say 8 o'clock in the evening or something like that. So it gives some flexibility. A lot of companies, I think, kind of have a hybrid model now where you go into the office perhaps 1 or 2 days and work from home 2 or 3 days. So that works fairly well, and people can actually be more productive working from home. One of the negatives is since you're working from home, you may now find you're on call at all hours. You may get calls at 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening, and that's where we need to kind of respect that work-life balance. So how do we do team building if we're all working remotely? That's a tough thing to do, and some of the people that I know in this realm, they hold virtual happy hours. So
Hmm.
they may on a Friday night or Thursday night say, everybody get online. We're going to have our favorite beverage. We're just going to talk about fun things, sports, or what's coming up. When you have business meetings, you might want to highlight one person on the team. What's their background? What are some of the strengths? What is their role? Um, what kind of hobbies or pets do they have? You can have contests. I've known some that had contests who can wear the ugliest shirt or the weirdest ball cap. So there's some team building things like that you can do to keep people feeling engaged and on a team because it is harder to do that way. But I think people, as they become more used to working from home and working through Zoom or Teams, they're getting more comfortable with it. In fact, I'm sure you've read in the news, a lot of people don't want to go back to the office 5 days a week.
Yeah.
It's becoming kind of the norm now. So companies that are trying to get all their folks back in the office every day are running into resistance. So we'll see how that pans out.
And it's such an interesting dynamic. You shared a funny thing like, oh, we haven't met in person, right? Because they're working from home, and then maybe they'll have some experience where people can come together. Similarly, I do trainings, corporate trainings, and so forth, and we'll do a hybrid. So sometimes we'll come in and do it in person, and then follow up, or do some virtual and then come in person. And there's always that thing like, oh my gosh, you're taller than I thought you'd be, or you're, like you have this one experience and it's like, oh, yeah, I'm used to a frame around you. And now here we are, in person. And it does add for a cool, dynamism and how we can interact. And the other challenge that we could be looking at is that leadership of being a self-starter, of having to dedicate that time. And I'm a sort of a dress for success kind of person, where we always want to look reasonably good. Like, this is a nice t-shirt. I don't have the collar today, but like I always look nice, and I'm wearing pants and, all of that. Um, there, there's an other than conscious sort of experience, I imagine that if you are not fully present, like if you're, business up top and relaxing down below, do you think that has an impact on efficacy and productivity?
As long as you don't have to stand up.
Well, just like mindset wise, like are there certain tricks that people may look at on how to show up, with more energy and, be able to be more productive in that home environment? Because you have the distractions, you got the cat, you got the dog, you got the children, you got the door. Yesterday I was on a call, and we both work from home as well, my wife and I. And so she's working with a client downstairs in her office. I'm upstairs in my office, and the pest guy comes, and it's like, oh, wait, hold on a sec. Right. And so there's a certain amount of appreciation, I think, on the other side, because now it's sort of expected that there's going to be
Yeah.
those interruptions.
Yes. I've seen, people whose cats jump up on the table while they're talking midstream, and
Yeah.
I think people kind of get a chuckle out of that. So it's just part of being human and having a life. I will say this: a lot of people today, you can buy those desks that will raise up. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? And I will say this: if you have to give a presentation, a formal presentation, and you're doing it by Zoom or Teams, I would encourage you to raise your table and stand up,
Stand.
because we tend to be, you're asking about how do we display more energy. That is one trick that will allow you to do that. It's
Oh
always
my
good.
goodness, David, you're speaking my language. That's one of I have a stand-up desk, and physiology is one of the most important parts of how we show up, and to stand up straight and deliver is very different than if you're sitting back. All right, well, today we're going to talk about the importance of energy. It's just it.
Of course, I'm violating my own principle by sitting down today,
Well, I'm
but
saying I'm sitting on a high stool, just in fairness and in total
fair
honesty, but I
enough.
can
Okay.
stand. Here we go. I'll stand for you. Let's
But I
see.
do think if you have to give a formal presentation, it helps to stand up. You just have more energy comes through. Undoubtedly, that's a good thing to do. So, leaders can go wrong. And I think I mentioned earlier, not everyone is cut out to be a leader. Not everybody should be CEO. And
Hmm.
and I was actually the president of a publicly held company a few years back, and it's not all it's cut out to be. Publicly held companies, of course, are traded on the stock exchange, and so when you're in that role, you've got calls with Wall Street. You have investors breathing
Hmm.
down your neck. When are you going to increase the dividend? How's the dividend going to look this quarter? Are you making more in sales? So there's a lot of pressure on the CEOs of publicly held companies. And in addition to making a company perform, you've got to deal with competitive issues, people issues, and you're always going to have people issues. Strategy: how do we keep our company in the leadership of our industry or segment? Or if we're not there, how do we come up with a strategy to help us get there? And on top of all that, you have to comply with the Sarbanes-Oxley financial reporting requirements, which is a law that came into effect, I want to say about 15 years ago. But it's just another layer of added complexity that presidents and CEOs of publicly held companies have to deal with. So, sometimes if you're in middle management and you're thinking, man, I would love to be the CEO of this company someday, there's a lot more than just kind of having the respect of being in that role and barking orders to people. It just isn't that easy. So
So
so that's kind of the tip off to folks out there listening that aspire to leadership roles. And I'm not saying don't have ambition. If that's what you want to do, go for it. Just open your eyes and be prepared as best you can to step into that role.
Well, you said a couple things I'd love for you to expand upon. One is the idea that not everyone necessarily is cut out for leadership, and I do agree with that. And then you also made another distinction: is that they may not want to be in that position. So from that perspective, I guess we have two sort of philosophies to unpack. Is one, is leadership a learned skill? Could you learn to be a more effective leader? And secondly, do you have to have the desire, or could you be a natural born leader and then the lack of a desire to fill that leadership position is maybe the energy that may contaminate the role.
So that goes back to the old question, are leaders made or born, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
what you're going to. Before I answer that, let me tell you a story. I was working with a company in Florida, and it was a mix of engineers and managers that were in this session I was putting forth. And we were taking a break, and one of the engineers came up to me, and he said, I've been in a project leadership role for about a year. And he said, I've realized I really don't like it. I like being out in the field dealing with technical problems, fixing those things. I hate having to deal with the people issues and conflict and writing reports. He said, how can I get back to what I was doing? And I said, well, as a leader, just make sure whatever you're working on doesn't work and it goes way over budget and slips schedule, and you'll be out of there. I'm being tongue in cheek, of course, but I thought it was interesting that this guy kind of recognized a year into a leadership role that he really liked working on the technical side as opposed to the managerial side. So, getting to your question, are leaders born, or are they kind of have that natural ability? And I think the answer is yes. In, in a flippant way of answering that, I think some people, just by their natural charisma, their ability to communicate effectively, and I'm sure people left brain, right brain. Some people are very good technically, and other people are more artistic or creative, right? So I think people do have some natural ability. If you look at some of our leaders, whether it's in industry or politics or the military, you find some people at the top just have a natural charisma, and they can convince people to see their perspective or their argument. They can be very effective. However, that doesn't mean, if charisma is not your thing, that doesn't mean you can't develop skills to be a good leader. And there's plenty of folks out there in industry and business that don't necessarily have charisma. I won't mention those. If you go on YouTube and just pull up different leaders, business leaders, some of them are very animated, and some of them are very kind of reserved and not that interesting to listen to, even though they may be titans of industry. So there are things that we can do to become better leaders. And so one of those things I would say, let me think about my list here. First of all, one of the characteristics of leadership is to have a high level of integrity or trust. If people don't respect you, or they think you're working with an agenda, or they don't trust you, they're not going to follow you. So always do your best to display a high level of personal character. Also develop new skills. Okay, so everybody has strengths and weaknesses. I have mine. I'm sure you have yours. If public speaking, for example, is a weakness, there's lots of things you can do to fill that gap. There's courses you can take on public speaking. You can join Toastmasters, and I will state, as you go further in your career up the ladder, giving presentations will become more important part of your job, whether it's presentations to the local chamber of commerce or to an industry trade group or investors. Having presentation skills is one thing that we can all work on and
Mm.
improve. And I know a lot of folks would rather have a root canal of a presentation, but it's an important skill to have. But if that's a weakness, figure out how to develop that. You can also find a coach or a mentor. Is there someone in your organization you respect that you could reach out and say, I've followed your career path. I see kind of the steps you've taken, and I'm really fascinated by this. Can you perhaps give me some tips or advice or coach me? Finding someone to help you higher up in the organization is a very good thing to do. It's building relationships, which is
I
kind of the next thing. Building relationships is very important, whether you are in sales and you want to sell more, or you're trying to become at the executive level. Building those relationships is pretty important. So I hope that maybe gives some insight. We can become better leaders. And I surf YouTube a lot. I just like to see how other leaders present themselves. You can go back and see speeches by Patton from the 1940s, which are quite entertaining. You can see speeches from John Kennedy, for example, or Ronald Reagan, or other people you may respect. And if you just look at the way they poise, Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State, is a very good example. He came out of the military, of course, and when he speaks in front of people, he has a very interesting posture. He's very erect, he's very erect and direct, and is a very charismatic speaker. So anyway, I think just how other leaders conduct themselves, you can learn a lot from that and learn to emulate their mannerisms and how they present themselves.
Well,
That
and
makes sense.
absolutely. I mean, well, as a speaker myself and one who trains speakers, I totally love everything about that because that's my passion. Part of my training is that. But something you said that was, I think, really, really valuable, and I'm not sure some people are comfortable with the idea of asking for some advice or help. So from a leader, like what advice, like as a leader, how could someone, like what would be the best way to approach someone to ask for mentorship, basically? And that's really what you're doing is saying, hey, I'm looking to up level my career. I want to model what you're doing. I know your time is very valuable. What, as someone who is looking for a mentorship, what would be a strategy or tip or two on how to approach and then how to maintain that relationship? Like, how do you set those boundaries, right? Because sometimes we could, someone, they're calling you all the time, like, hey, this just happened. What do you think? Like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for all that. Like, what is that relationship? How would one form that? Because I from my perspective, I believe if there was more of that in the space, the companies would thrive like crazy because there'll be a clear path to advancement and done in a way that maintains a growing culture. It's an open dialogue. We can really inspire leadership because now we're able to anticipate like all of the great things that would make the company run more smoothly comes out of those relationships.
Well, sometimes it doesn't have to be a person at the VP level. It could be a middle manager, maybe a couple of steps above you. And I think um, when I've been in a role and somebody contacts me and they may say, well, would you mind meeting me for a cup of coffee or we could go out to lunch? I'm new with the company and I'm really interested in what your organization or your department does, and I'd like to learn more about it. That might be one way to kind of open the door a bit. And whenever anyone would approach me with something like that, I'm more than happy to spend a few minutes over a cup of coffee and talk to them about the organization. And if they want to know, that kind of work looks interesting. Is there a possibility I could perhaps transfer into your organization in the future? I think those kind of discussions are very kind of neutral. They're very general, and they can kind of get your foot in the door. And then once you've met with this person a couple of times, you're going to find that they're going to open up about some of their background and how they got to where they are. If you find people will just tell you, no, I'm really not interested, I don't have the time, well, that's probably not a person you want to approach anyway. So there are always going to be opportunities to reach out to someone, perhaps in another department. Um, but I think most people are open to sharing their experience and how they can work with you or help you in your career. So I think it's just a matter of approaching someone and expressing a sincere desire to learn about them and what they do. There's another way kind of around that. If you're not really interested in staying with your company, how do you find somebody external to your company? And if you join trade groups, for example, if you're a marketing person, there's all sorts of business groups you can join. And perhaps, the American Marketing Association or SHRM, which is a human resource organization, start attending their meetings and meeting people and asking folks, hey, can we meet for lunch or something and tell me about your company, and I'm interested in doing these things. So it's kind of a combination of networking and information gathering. But I think relationship building is very important, whether you want to stay with your company or you want to move outside. And if you look at most executives, almost all of them are relationship building. They're in chambers of commerce, they go to Rotary
Hmm.
or Optimist Club meetings, or they're in trade groups, they're giving speeches and presentations at conferences, they're building relationships. And that's how they get to where they are. So, you know, start small, start with your immediate supervisor or one or two levels above that, and just find out what's going on, learn what you can, and see how open they are. I think you'll be surprised at how open people are to wanting to help you.
So yeah, I think that's a great paradigm shift of sort of reframing that experience, because the truth is that most leaders do want to inspire more leadership. Like true leaders, like their gig as a leader is to inspire leadership. So they're very
Correct.
happy to for that go getter attitude. Like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, let me share some of my wisdom and experience. And I love that distinction where it doesn't have to be necessarily in your organization. It can be meet some people in other organizations that are further along on your path. Doesn't have to be, like 100 miles ahead. It probably may not serve you to be that far, because the gap might be a little, there may be some unspoken uh, distinctions that aren't noticed when you're on a closer level. You kind of know where they're at, what they're dealing with. If it's too far, there's a lot of things that are happening that may not grasp to go. And that's where a lot of times there's some challenges with leadership, where they have someone who is, maybe new to the company, and then they'll see someone making it look real easy, and they go, well, I would do it this way. And the leader's like, yeah, but yeah, that would be great. And you know why we don't do it that way? And then, and all of these other things that you don't see, you're not really privy to. Sorry, I know it looks like it could go that way, but it's not. And there's a larger gap there. And the other thing, which, you've shared, is that relationship capital is priceless, and the acknowledgement of the human capital in the organization, so that where a great leader understands, from my perspective, that people run the business. The
It's
person
interesting
drives a
when,
professional.
yeah, when you interview for a job, um, and you're called in, maybe they looked over your resume and you appear to have the skill set they're looking for. But when you actually show up for the interview, a half of the interview, 50% of it, is really going to be, is this person going to fit into our company? So you may be a very brilliant accounting professional or a finance professional or an engineering professional, but they're also going to want to know, can you get along with people? Can you take direction? Are you going to be a good fit for our corporate culture? So those are things to really think about. Half of the interview is really going to be the personal communication side, as well as your technical skills that you bring to the table. Another thing that I have found interesting, many years ago, I was working with the company. I'd been in the engineering group for about 10 years, and I was looking to branch out and expand into marketing or something different. If you're in a large company, it's let me back up. If you're in a company and you're approaching another company and you say, I'd like to get into marketing, but my background's in engineering, it's going to be extremely difficult to do that. However, if you're working in a large company and you can build a relationship with someone in the marketing department, it's much easier to transfer to another segment or industry within a big company than it is trying to move outside of a company. Does that make sense? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, to cross departments
Yes.
internally is a lot easier than to go that outside, because again, that's the relationship. You build the relationship, and then someone goes, hey, yo, because at the end of the day, you're so right. the interview and the conversation is really about, can I like hang with this person? Is this someone I could spend time with? Are we in rapport? So that same mindset, that's why people like to promote or advance within, because they've already been through that. Like, oh, okay, I can hang with this person. I'm cool with letting them try out this new opportunity. And by doing so, you also, coming from a person, speaking now to the person who may do that uh, cross department move, is you're going to have so much more leeway with potential mistakes or what have you, because you've got so much rapport. Like, they're giving it a shot. Come on, I'm rooting for you. I want you to do this. I want you to succeed. Whereas when you're a new hire, there's a little bit of, if we're honest, there's a little bit of this is a trial period, and we don't know if you're going to stay here. At least if it's
Correct.
departmental, it's like, okay, let's give you a shot in this department, and if it doesn't work, we like you, so we'll give you your other opportunity back. It just didn't work out. So it's a really important distinction that we really grasp the value of building strong relationships.
Yeah, and I think you're correct. The only thing is we certainly don't want to plan to fail, right?
No, 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 of course not. I just
I
mean
know
that
that's not what
more,
you're
you just
saying.
got a little bit more grace, because sometimes, there's some leaders that maybe have less tolerance for failure.
Yes.
And the challenge with that is there is no success without failure. And that person who fails, if they learn from it, will be invaluable. You could hire another person and they can make the same mistake, and then another person make the same mistake. If we've got a system where we're able to allow, to a certain degree, obviously we don't want people screwing up all the time, yet there are times where, hey, you got to try something new. We're going to try something, this is a learning moment. There has to, that was a grace I was referring to. Obviously we want to set everyone up to succeed. That's, I don't want to, come across as like, yeah, let's, you're friends, do whatever you want. Like,
No, but you bring up a really good point, and I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to mention it if you didn't, and that is we all make mistakes, correct? That happens.
mm-hmm.
Um, and that happens at all levels of a person's career. The trick is learn from those mistakes and don't repeat them. If you keep repeating the same mistakes, you're obviously not learning your lesson. And I mean, that sounds simplistic, but I have seen people, they move from department to department, and maybe their management style isn't very good, or people don't like working with this particular individual because of their personality style. And so they don't learn from their mistakes, and ultimately that can lead to a lot of problems. There's another thing I would suggest. Some companies may offer this internally. You can check with your HR people, but if you have not taken a personality profile test, that's a very useful tool, whether it's Myers-Briggs or HBDI. There's a number of tools out there
Mm-hmm.
that can help you work with other styles. In other words, if you're a very driven person, a driver, and you've got folks on your team that are maybe amiables or expressives, which are your more creative types, when you go through these personality styles and they show you what your style is and how you should relate to those other personality styles, it gives you it's like an epiphany that just
Mm-hmm.
opens up. Oh, I've never thought about it like this. So, I would certainly encourage your listeners, if they have not done something like that, seek it out. It's quite insightful, and it will help you in your career. It really will. I think some of the other things that you can do if you're aspiring to leadership is to write articles for technical journals. They're always looking for people to contribute. So write some papers and have them published. Go to conferences, present on a topic that you feel very well versed and comfortable with. Join local trade groups or chambers of commerce, because you are going to meet a lot of people outside of your organization through those mechanisms. And that can always lead to other opportunities. go to any kind of networking events you can. There's plenty of opportunities out there. Now, the trouble is if you're a young married professional, maybe you've got a family life, and that impinges on your after work time. So
Well,
it's
there
an
are
investment.
networking groups that meet in the mornings. They do BNI is one. They do that in the mornings, and there's some that meet during lunch.
Correct.
And I might suggest if there isn't one in your area, start one.
Sure.
If the time, I mean, I understand. I mean, it's funny this week. I came home. My wife today was like, "So what's going on this week?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I got me. Sorry, remember I told you every night this week I've got something going on." And last night was an impromptu. So pretty much 4 out of the 5 nights this week I'm not home. Um, and we have a relationship where she understands that relationship building is so important that it's worth it, that sometimes it does happen and so forth. We live in a pretty, like, there's a lot of stuff going on. I've been in areas where there's not as many meetings, so you have to start them. You just have to say, hey, I'm going to hold it, and here's what works for me. Maybe it's right after work. It's a happy hour time instead of something that might go on awfully late, or do a lunchtime meeting. Cannot stress enough, to your point, the value of building relationships in all areas of life. And then also, what's your experience when you're doing that? I have, tons to talk about on like what to do at these networking events. Let's say someone is like, okay, I want to go to a networking event. What are some best practices? How to maximize the networking opportunity?
Well, if it's perhaps a dinner meeting, whoever you're sitting to at the table, strike up a conversation, swap business cards. If they have a speaker, someone that's thought very highly of in the community as a speaker, reach out to that person afterwards. Find them on LinkedIn, and I think most people that are in business today are pretty active on LinkedIn. So I suspect most of your audience knows all about LinkedIn, but
Hmm.
certainly that's one way to connect with people. Um, so that it's basically basic networking and reaching out to people. Most people I found will connect with you if they don't think you're selling life insurance or want to refinance their home.
Not
But
that there's anything wrong with that, but that's
not
not.
that there's anything wrong with that. That's correct. But anyway, LinkedIn is a great platform to reach out and meet people and make appointments. People are usually very open to meeting with you, assuming, of course, you're in the same general vicinity. There's another thing you can do to get high visibility, to get noticed by your senior team, and that is to take on assignments that no one else wants. Those are the ones that have a high fear factor, fear of failure. Um, Others won't touch it because they think, man, if I screw this up, it's going to ruin my career. But I think there's an opportunity there if you take on those types of assignments and put out 100%. Is there a guarantee you'll succeed? No. Not every project or company can be rescued. But if you put in 100% and you try to negotiate, if I can't turn this around, what options do I have at that point? Try to set yourself an exit strategy as well. And I think that's one way to get a lot of visibility. But if you can be successful, that's even better. And I will say this, tongue in cheek, when I started this line of work, I had a full head of hair, and I'm actually only 28 years old. So
Well,
what can you say?
so
But
actually, you're opening a door that I also was looking to go down a little bit. Is, can you share a time when you were nervous about, maybe what was going to happen, or a failure that you were like, oh man, I learned something, and I learned from the unfortunate outcome, like, just what do we do and how do we pick ourselves back up?
yeah, I can give you one very clearly. In fact, I was very hesitant to take on the assignment because I thought the possibility of failure was high. I was a consultant brought in to turn around a program. It was $1 billion, and this company was $100 million over budget after 8 months, and it was about 24 related projects. So they were kind of rolled up into a program, and it had a lot of research and development, engineering, manufacturing, construction, expanding the capacity of a factory. It was really quite scary, and I didn't know anything about the particular product that they were developing. And so as I got in, the first day there, the client says, "We're expecting you to find our $100 million." So no pressure, you know.
Hey, did they give you a
But once you go
timeline? And
through
we'd
the
like it in 20 minutes?
Yeah, there was a couple of times when I really thought about pursuing other opportunities, because the people that were in charge really weren't the best folks to be running things. They didn't have the right skill set. And by that, I mean, didn't like resolving conflict, didn't communicate, didn't think budgets and schedules were important. They were very highly brilliant but technical people that were looking at developing the next patent or the next great widget for the market. So there was a lot of animosity among some of the people when I came in. I came in with a team of 6 people to help turn this program around. So there was a lot of antagonism. We were not welcomed by the folks that had been working on that program. And it was a matter of some of the same mistakes I mentioned earlier in this podcast. It was poor planning, poor execution, not in poor discipline in managing budgets and schedules and all that type of thing. So it was a matter of coming up with new plans and how did we get the folks that really didn't like us and didn't want us there to buy into this. So we basically tried to ingratiate ourselves with them. If they had a company tennis league, we would join their tennis league and play tennis with them after work and then go get a beer.
Did you ever see them like the eye roll, like, oh, here come those guys, and like,
Yep.
right? So
Take them out to lunch once a week and just talk things through and try to learn who they were as people. And also tell them we are not there to make you look bad. In fact, we want you to be successful, and everything we do for you, we're going to give you the credit. And so over 3-4 months into this program, they started to buy in what the things that I was proposing to them, and things got a lot better. And ultimately, it was successful. It took a good year and a half to get them back on track. But anyway, those are just some of the techniques that I've used. You know, give your client all the credit. You're not going to be there long term. They're the ones. They're going to be there still after I leave.
and when you give them the credit, they'll happily say that you played a part in it.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that's, from a testimonial and that standpoint, obviously that's valuable. But yeah, when we're in there supporting the growth, the transformation of the organization, it's not us, it's them who are looking to succeed.
Well,
Their
and
success
part of it
is our
is,
success.
yeah, but I was very hesitant to take that on. But that reinforces what I said. If you'll
Yep.
take on assignments that everyone else is afraid to tackle, I think that can really work in your favor. The other thing I'll mention is when you go into companies like this, and we can help turn around a bad situation. If you don't change the organizational culture and how they plan things, you're not going to change anything. So the minute we leave, if you haven't figured out how to change their whole, let's say, process of doing things, then they're not, the next project they tackle will be in the same situation. So a lot of times when you go into assignments, you'll find that you are not only trying to turn around a bad situation, but you're having to develop new policies or procedures or whatever so that in the future they can continue on successfully and not fall back into old habits. And it's very easy for companies to fall back into old habits. You know, after you've been gone a couple of years, they forget how bad it was and how they got there.
So yeah, actually, great distinction there. From a consulting perspective, do you have a system in place to encourage the continuation of new habits and patterns? Do you do a follow up with them and say, hey, like as part of our model, once, like after we're done, every 3 months we're together, then every 6 months, and then once a year for a period of time? Is that something that you've done, thought of doing, think would be valuable? Would that have helped in retrospect to, from when you made that comment?
For a company that was in that position, it is helpful, and that has happened. Some clients, once you're done, they're really, well, we'll call you on the next project or the next problem.
Knowing
But
that they'll
there are
probably need
some,
you again.
yeah, but there are some companies that do value that follow up, and especially if you help them develop, let's say, perspective on work and how to plan and execute things. They're interested to have you come back every 6 months and say, okay, is there anything new, or do we need to refine anything that we're already doing? So it's pretty useful to have that follow up. Agreed.
Love it. So, as we're sort of looking into the future and all of the new interesting, obstacles, challenges, opportunities for growth, what do you see as where maybe different businesses, industries are going between technology, the gig economy, the how without a lack of a better word, different ideologies and how that might influence? What do you see like on the horizon if we were to again put our leadership anticipation hat on? What do you see as opportunities and ways that we can show up to be more effective leaders as it pertains to both corporately and personally?
I think the biggest challenge, as I'm sure you're aware, is technology changes so quickly. How do we identify new technologies that can help our business, and how do we implement them? Artificial intelligence is kind of the big thing out there now, and I think it's going to have a big impact. How that impact is going to be, I'm not quite
Yeah, who
sure.
knows?
I think in manufacturing, you're going to find artificial intelligence combined with robotics to have more streamlined, and that means if you're putting out a high quality product, it will be more. Each unit will have the same level of quality. There won't be a huge, diverse gap in quality between car number one and car number three. So there's a lot of things I think that are going to improve the whole manufacturing process. I think artificial intelligence and 5G networks, they're already looking at having self-driving cars, and you kind of have to have a 5G network in place because you got to have more towers so that cars can communicate more frequently as they're driving along a road or a path. And that can also apply to what they're calling smart cities. So before you leave, you can hook your phone up and it will tell you at your destination not only the best way to get there, but where parking is available to park. It can perhaps even reserve a spot for you. So we're going to see all sorts of, I think, artificial intelligence applied to perhaps smart urban planning or smart cities. Um, so I just think trying to keep up with all the technological changes that are out there is pretty challenging for
Oh
anyone.
my
And,
goodness,
and there's
yeah.
a lot of neat stuff going on, but my
Have
crystal
you played
ball
with the AI with that Chat GPT at all?
I don't know. My crystal ball isn't as clear as some other futurist
No,
folks
no, but
might
have you
be.
played with it? Have you gone into
No, I
Chat
haven't.
GPT? And I was actually I to get your bio. I was going in modifying your bio a little bit, and one of the things you could do with it is I was going to take it, throw it in Chat GPT because your LinkedIn bio is pretty long. I was going
Yeah.
to ask it to chunk it down to like 500 words, and it will do it in like a second. It'll be like, okay, and it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, and there's even some AI programs out there. You just tell it a topic. I want a 500 word topic on whatever it is,
Yeah, this will do that. Yeah,
this,
ChatGPT will do it.
and it will actually write a paper for you. Of course, that's going to be great for people in college or university, that have a term paper due and they just get AI to do it for them. So
Yeah,
we'll see
yeah,
how
that's
that
going to
works.
be interesting because, one might argue the calculator or, word correct, right? People, are they worse spellers now because they don't have to? Because word probably like, whatever you're using will automatically, like even Grammarly now, and it'll change everything for you.
Even
Is
just
that making
autocorrect,
us, huh?
even autocorrect can change the
Right.
meaning of a sentence.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah. You put put the wrong comma in and, or don't put one in.
Well, when we communicate by email or writing a letter, a memo or something, I find I have to double and triple check it before I hit that send button because autocorrect will change things, and it's not always. Sometimes
The
it will
most
change the
flattering.
meaning. Sometimes it makes you look like a dummy because the punctuation's not quite right. So,
Yeah.
always double check before you hit send.
Right, because you could spell the word right. It's just the wrong word.
Correct. Yep. So,
Love
there's
it.
all sorts of things like that we have to be aware of. But I think if we look at leadership versus management, there is a
Mm,
difference. Management is more on developing budgets and schedules, status reporting, problem solving. That's kind of at the organic level. If you're looking at leaders, they're going to be more visionary, developing strategies, making sure resources on this project are adequate, or do we need to shift things around? And then, of course, they're also looking at motivating the team, supporting with dollars or equipment or whatever the team may need to succeed. And so being in a manager's role and a leadership role are really two different things. And if you as an individual can do both the management and leadership roles, you're going to be very successful
right. Well,
because
that's the
leaders
dance.
motivate and inspire, really.
Right, because some leaders need the title as the leader,
Yes.
whereas others just show up and it's kind of what you started with. Some of the differences between leadership styles. Are we coming in, autocratically, dictator? This is the way it's going to be, or are you inspiring the team to basically take initiative and anticipate the needs of the department, of the organization? And from a leadership perspective, one of the things that I really look to and lean into is the company's mission, vision, and values. Like, when that is clear, a lot more of hands-off approach can be taken, because now we have a North Star. Now we go, okay, well, at least we're on the same page as to where we're going here. Oftentimes, if that is not clear, we're left to some interesting of our own devices.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. There's a quote, and I think it's John Maxwell, who you may know, has a
Of
lot of
course.
interesting books on leadership. And one of his quotes is, "He who thinks he leads but has no followers is only out for a walk," which
Yeah.
I think is a great quote. Good leaders will attract other leaders. In fact, I think leadership to some extent is measured by the caliber of the people that are following you or working with you. So, you know, motivating is and being a visionary, that's easier said than done. That's not easy. Getting everybody to see the same perspective. In other words, you've got to keep people on the road, all marching together down the same path. That's not easy to do. And mission, vision, strategies, and statements are a part of that.
And they're sometimes so overlooked because they don't think it's as important. And yet that's like, it's going, well, we could bake a cake without the baking soda. Yeah, no, you kind of, but it's only a little bit. Yeah, I know. It's only one sentence, two sentences. But I tell you what, without those one or two sentences, without that, clearly like defined value system, we're kind of going to be just kind of hoping that that we
Yeah.
get where we're looking to go.
I think you find the more successful companies have very focused strategies and mission statements, and everybody in those various departments in that company know what they're supposed to be doing. And if they're not doing something that supports the mission statement or the strategic plan, then why are they doing that, or why are they there? So it's a matter of staying focused and developing clear objectives and strategies. That makes
Love it.
sense.
Yeah, 100%. And we're obviously we've been talking for quite a while. I didn't want to forget something about you that we connected on when we first met, as well, is your music background. And how did that influence you in your, because music is certainly a more creative in many respects. Like there's still some strategy and so forth in there, but creativity is a huge part of it. How has music influenced your leadership style, your approach to transformation? How do you bring that in?
That's an interesting question, and I've thought about that several times. I started playing professionally out in clubs and things when I was 14, and I studied music in college as well as engineering and business, but I studied music as well and continued to play, and I still continue to play here. But one interesting fact is when I've had to give presentations or speak at conferences, that doesn't bother me at all. I'm perfectly comfortable, and I have to attribute that to playing in front of people, sometimes hostile crowds. I never had to play behind chicken wire, but it's a really good way to cut your teeth on dealing with an audience. And I have found that what I learned playing music in front of people has directly transferred to my being able to speak comfortably in front of audiences of a couple of thousand people if need be. So it's kind of interesting. I also think, work's important, and I've got a few friends that are higher level executives, and even after work, when we're at social events, they're still talking work. And you have to have that work-life balance. And I find that having a hobby, in my case, music, gives me an escape from the pressures of business. It keeps your mind active and sharp in a different way because I not only play out, I don't play out as much as I used to, but I have a studio at my house and I write and record my own original music. So you never know, you may hear a jingle someday that I've written.
That would be awesome.
But
And how did being creative, like using the creativity aspect of the music, do you think that that has also contributed to your ability to be a more effective consultant, to be a problem solver, because you're used to perhaps trying different things
Yeah, I
in
think
from
that's a
that
really good
perspective?
point. Definitely, when you're writing a tune and if something doesn't sound right, you take a different approach, or maybe you change to a different key, have a key change in the middle of a song, and that certainly carries over to business. Well, let's look at several alternatives here. If Plan A doesn't work, what do we have as a Plan B or a Plan C? I also think being creative helps you see problems from maybe a little different perspective. You might be more open to a more creative way to tackle or solve a problem or a business problem. And dealing in the music world, there's all sorts of personality types. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And I think it gives you a little bit more patience in dealing with different personality styles and different perspectives. I think some CEOs would just perhaps dismiss off the wall ideas immediately, but I tend to listen to some of those off the wall ideas, and I may reject them ultimately, but I'm certainly willing to give them a fair shake. And I think that all ties in with just being creative and looking for different ways to do things. And another hallmark of leadership is leaders are never happy with the status quo, right? They always want to do things different. They want to do things better. They want to leave their mark on the business after they've gone. And I think that takes a certain amount of creativity to do that. And I think having a musical background has enabled me to be more creative in looking at problems.
Absolutely. And what I found is even though maybe that idea may be so off the wall, it inspires another thought. Just like
Yes.
when you're jamming out and someone tries something new, you're like, whoa, what was that? And then you go, oh, but that leads me over here. It's something that I hadn't maybe would have thought of. But they're by having that little spark of, whoa, that was interesting. It really does inspire more thoughts. So I love the idea. It's interesting. A good friend of mine who's a very very successful leader as well. We've worked together on a bunch of projects. He's not creative as much as he is. The way he uses creativity, he plays chess. And again, these are one of those things where it keeps the mind sharp. So to your point, whether it's chess, whether it's music, whether it's something that inspires some like thinking, creative thinking. Well, let me track ahead. Where is this going? Where is, there's all of these different ways to keep ourselves strong. Oh, and we got some great notes. Took some great notes. You've been already. Leonard Rivera he's got to go, but took some great notes. So there you
Great.
go.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to help there. And I kind of sense we're coming to a close. So
Yeah,
if,
it's been
if you
a
think about the
we
chess
shared it was going to
player,
be a long format, but I also want to respect your time and
that's
not
okay.
end up going to dinner.
But if if you think about the chess player, that involves a lot of strategy.
Hmm.
And when it comes to perhaps strategic planning for a company, that might be a good use of their creative minds to do that. Also, music, if you think about it, music is very structured and has a logical flow. That helps you think about how do we get from point A to point B? What is the flow that we should be looking at? So I think any kind of hobbies like that are very useful in business and can have some interesting applications. So, don't dismiss all those things you do for fun. They could have business applications too.
100%, right? Well, because the old saying, "How you do anything is how you do everything." So
Yes.
we may want to, look at that as how are we showing up, and then even though when it comes from a conversation earlier about developing leadership skills, perhaps someone, if they're looking to improve their leadership skills and improve their style, is apply some of the things we're learning. If you're out there listening to us or listening to other leaders and go, well, let me try that, let me look at through that filter, perhaps maybe try something new or ask that question or go to that networking event. I was talking to another friend the other day, and he was on his way to a networking event, and I was like, oh, that's great. He goes, yeah, I used to, I was always said I don't want to go, and it's stupid, what am I going to go for? But after talking to you, I realized that there might be something there, like I could probably benefit from that. And I was like, well, yeah, how could you lose? Like, you're
Yes.
meeting great people. You never know, like, who you're going to meet. And I think one of the challenges that some people look at networking is that they're looking to conduct a transaction in the networking event. Like, I'm going to get a new client or close a deal or whatever. It's like, no, 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 no. You're just building relationships. Bring value to that. Don't be looking at what you can get. Look at what you can give. And what'll happen is natural reciprocity will kick in, and then someone will say, well, wait, tell me, what can I do for you? What are you looking for? And they'll happily provide the referral, the resource, the tip, the idea. And this is how we're all going to grow together and build, more momentum for each other, as opposed to, like it's like the mafia. Hey, I give to you, you give to me. Like, it's no, 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 no. We're just going to grow together and add as much value as we possibly can, and then happily receive whatever input could come. But it may not come from that person directly. It's going to come from other areas. And that's a paradigm shift in sort of philosophy going into networking for some.
I couldn't agree with that more. To me, it's a real turnoff when you meet somebody for the first time and you swap business cards, and the next day they're already sending me proposals or asking me for business. And I'm like, well, I don't really know you yet. And especially in the consulting world, there's a certain amount of lead time in relationship building. So everything you mentioned was spot on. I thoroughly agree with that. You build relationships, and you kind of have to look at yourself as an aspirin salesman. If the person you're targeting does not have a headache, they're not interested in your product, the aspirin. But they may have a headache next week, right? In which case they're going
Right.
to think about you and call you if you've built a relationship. Same
But if
thing
you're
if
selling aspirin, don't hit him in the head either.
That's true. That's true. So it's a matter of timing, but I think the whole relationship building in any business, whatever segment or profession you're in, relationship building is the key to everything. And networking events, sometimes you're going to go to some that just weren't that great, but go to others. There's going to be ones out there that you're going to really get energized by either the topic or the type of people you meet or where they're held. That's just so important. So maybe, if you don't mind, I'll close with a few kind of leadership tenets, if you will. Is that
Please.
okay?
Absolutely.
All right. So a little bit of a review. Have high personal integrity. You've got to have a trust factor. It helps if you're visionary. You have to stay focused on results, and you also have to hold people accountable. You can't let folks slide, because if folks are sliding, other people on your team know who that is and they're waiting for you to resolve it. You need strong interpersonal skills. You need great communication skills. You need to be able to motivate others on your team. You need to be a change agent. That means when you see a way of doing things better, figure out how to implement change. Follow through on your commitments. If you promise to have a deliverable by August 1st, by golly, do your best to meet that date, or have a really good reason and advance notice of why you can't meet a commitment. And finally, you want to get things done through other people. That's what great leaders do. You can't possibly do everything yourself. So you need to delegate some of your activities, and the people that you select to delegate those activities to, because they'll be acting on your behalf, is very important. So those are maybe kind of the closing points that I would leave with your listeners, and hope that they have found some of this useful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I found it useful, and it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to chat with you. One of the things, and I'm going to lead by example here. One of the things oftentimes that people do, and it's a little bit of a hot button for me at networking events, is besides the verbal diarrhea and like trying to sell you there, is no one books a meeting. Like
Yeah.
they'll see someone. So my advice to anyone who goes to a networking event, if you meet somebody, do a follow-up. Like, hey, excuse me, you want to grab coffee? Do you want to not? I'll see you at the next networking event. See you
That's
next
how you
month.
build a relationship, right?
Right. So follow up and add some value of kind of bringing like, hey, what can I do for you? Like, tell me about you and how can I support you? What are you looking for? What are your ideal referrals? So one of the gifts I'd like to, provide for you is the opportunity to share who is your ideal referral. Like if someone was looking to like your avatar, what is something that like your ideal contact referral, and maybe someone's listening and go, ooh, that's what I'd love to learn more about David from that angle.
Sure. Couple of things. One, I have done a fair amount of executive coaching. So if there are executives that are having trouble dealing with people or communicating, I've done that type of work. Obviously, I can help companies if they're looking at a major program or business initiative. I can help them plan and execute that if they need help there. And then in the world of product development, I can help facilitate product design and execution and developing new products. So a lot of different things. And then finally, if you've got a business or a big project that's in trouble, a turnaround scenario, I can help with that though. But one caveat, I compare projects in trouble like patients in a hospital. Every patient that goes in does not come out, right? Some projects and businesses are not going to be saved because maybe they were a bad business decision to start with. But all that aside, that's some of my, I guess, skill sets, if you will. So we'll see what, if anything, develops. And feel free, your listeners, to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've got a profile there, so would be happy to connect with anyone that's interested.
Love it. Thank you so much. And I thank you so much for taking your time to share your wisdom, and you've been a hoot. Thank you so much. You're a pleasure to chat with, and I'm sure everyone noticed that and go, oh, as we talked earlier, you're someone who could definitely hang in an office or come in and just feel comfortable and enjoy the getting into the weeds, because sometimes that's not as much fun. So it's great to have someone with a great personality to do that with, so we can at least enjoy the process as much as possible. Because unfortunately, sometimes doing that work can get a little hairy. So thank you for that. I appreciate you for who you are and who you aren't. And what I'd love is maybe offline, if there's anyone that you could think of that other leaders that you think would have a great story and personality to share, please feel free to send them my way. And I would love to connect with them, because great leaders hang out with other great leaders. So I'm sure your friends and associates are amazing as you are, and I'd be happy to celebrate their stories as well.
I'd be happy to do a follow-up for you on that. And thank you for the opportunity to chat with you and your audience, and thank you for your kind words. Very nice of you to say.
You got it, brother. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing more of your adventures.
Okay, thank you. Take care, and goodbye to everyone in your audience. So
You
long.
too. God bless.